views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Bronxnet or the program underwriters.
Hi guys, I'm Em, also known as the Hungry Dominican, and I'm your host for Foodie Down Bronx, where we'll catch up with artists, entrepreneurs, and foodies who make a part of the incredible and ever-growing Bronx food scene. So if you like to eat, get your appetites ready, and stay tuned. From Bronxnet to the world, this is Foodie Down Bronx. Welcome to Foodie Down Bronx. Stay connected to us on Instagram at Bronxnet TV and Foodie Down Bronx, and follow me at The Hungry Dominican. On today's show, we'll talk to co-founder of Rise and Root Farm, Karen Washington, and co-founder of Woke Foods, Isan Batista, about food justice, personal motivations, goals, social media, and of course, food. We'll also talk about the recent Food and Gentrification Panel and community conversation they were both a part of. Before we meet our guests, let's bite down on some Chew News, where we bring you this week's most important food news. On Thursday, July 18th, I had the pleasure of attending Food and Gentrification, a Woke Foods panel, where activists and community leaders discussed the direct correlation between food and how it affects neighborhoods and the people in those neighborhoods. It was an informative panel, an eye-opening one, and very necessary. Let's check it out. Hey guys, so we're here at the Banknote Building, and we're here for the Food and Gentrification, which is a Woke Foods panel and community conversation. We're going to hear from some community organizers and some activists, and they'll be discussing food, displacement, and gentrification, and how it affects all the communities right here in the Bronx. It should be a super interesting night, so join me.
A lot of times when we think about gentrification, we're thinking about housing and displacement, which of course is very important and very real. And we wanted to talk about how gentrification impacts our access to food and our relationship to food.
Food and gentrification was the topic of discussion among 4 panelists, each of whom are actively involved in their communities and equipped to speak about the issues and complexity of the subject.
Food is a commodity. Housing is a commodity. So any conversation around gentrification that doesn't leave room to question that and come up with alternatives and push different options then is allowing that relationship to stay the same.
The reason why I grow food is because it is a weapon for me to show my power, to understand where my food comes from, to understand where my community has access to food that they can grow with their own hands, food that is culturally appropriate, food that they can grow to nourish their body, and understand the history around food.
The educative and informational conversation also provided alternative suggestions as it relates to community engagement and consumerism.
I think empowering the community, specifically Hunts Point, through free political education, providing free food, also taking over community gardens. That's our land, that's our space. We should be able to open up the gates when we want to.
Aligning our food production to our values of economic justice and racial equity. And so it's not just enough for us to, as a company that focuses on plant-based foods, it's not enough to just get organic vegetables and fruits from whatever, wherever. It has to go like a step further.
So the Food and Gentrification panel just wrapped up, and I've got to say that it left me with a lot to think about. The main thing being that I have to really open my eyes to where I get my food, where my food comes from, and which businesses I patronize. I am excited to continue the conversation with 2 of the panelists that showed up tonight, because I think that this is a very important conversation to continue to have, and it's also an important conversation for people to continue to hear. And that, my friends, is this week's Chew News, providing you with a little food for thought. We'll be back after this break.